Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. All right, hey, welcome back, and delighted to have back in the studio with us John Mittendorf. I call him our staff researcher. He calls himself John Mittendorf. Yeah. He does work with Answers in Genesis and does a lot of interesting research for us, stuff for us to talk about. We came through the 4 blood moons, which was fascinating.
And we're still alive.
And we're still here.
Yeah.
We got April 15th. We'll see what happens on that one.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, the whole subject of global warming versus climate change has been a very hot topic. And the problem is, it's kind of like democracy and federalism and republic. They all get mixed up and you think you're talking freedom. You're not. We just came through that discussion. So what's the difference between global warming and climate change? It's significant. In the past, John, I've had our good buddy Leon Hunsaker talk about this from his perspective as a meteorologist. You know.
And he has good background information on the subject.
He went back and looked at, and I'm just going to capsulate. I don't want to give all, I can't directly speak for him, but here's what I got out of it, and that is, it's cyclic. And you look at El Nino and La Nina, and you look at the jet streams, and you look at weather patterns of decades gone past, and he'd say it's a matter of time you cycle through this. Now, that's not to say that there isn't some changing going on, but for the most part, he'll look at it as somewhat cyclic.
How long ago do you think that was that you asked him? Because I can still remember I was listening to the program that day when you asked him.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah, and I can still remember his answer.
Yeah.
It's cyclic.
It's cyclic.
Yeah.
So anyway, John has decided to help us get a handle on the subject of global warming and climate change, because I think a couple things come out of this as believers and just human beings on Earth. Stewardship, conservation, and perspective. Remember those 3 words: stewardship, conservation, and perspective. So let's dive into this. Would you?
Boy.
Are you still okay?
You know, as I was studying for this, Perry, and I've studied a little bit on the subject before, but as I was going through it, and I was impressed with 2 things. First of all, the complete amount and depth of material that is out there on the subject and how slanted it is. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, as I was studying for this, I thought, you know, there's one other subject that exactly parallels this. Evolution-creation debate.
Oh, okay.
They're exactly the same. Okay. On one side, you have the media, you have scientists, most secular scientists. Mm-hmm. You have all these people with credentials that they give them a platform, mm-hmm. that are saying one thing.
That are tenured.
Yeah, tenured. Okay, then on the other side, then you have a much smaller category of people that are saying, no, wait, that's not correct. Here are the facts. But the smaller section of people really aren't heard. It's the larger section of people that have the voice of the media and magazines and television and you know, everything else. And you keep hearing this drumbeat over and over and over: global warming, climate change, global warming, climate change. We're going down the tank. The oceans are going to rise 50 feet. And a lot of that, I think, was brought to the surface in 2006 with Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. Mm-hmm. And of course, in the movie, it showed this polar bear on this ice floe, and the ice floe was slowly melting, and then all of a sudden, the poor polar bear slides off, and you know, now they're an endangered species. And in fact, polar bears are doing quite nicely. Mm-hmm. But I read letters to the editor in Mail Tribune quite often. And it's amazing, the past 2 weeks, there has probably been a letter to the editor in the MT almost every day on global warming. It's amazing.
Okay, and I can tell you this, as being a chairman of a politically involved party, that those can be arranged. So if there's an organization out there trying to make a point,
right,
they have their people write those letters.
Exactly. But you know, to the credit of the Mail Tribune, they will print letters from both sides.
Yeah. No, that's their job.
Yeah. And you know, and I think they do a very, very good job of that. As an example, Perry, this was just a couple of weeks ago. Man-made global warming is worsening and will disrupt both the natural world and human society. And I know you've heard this over and over and over again. warns a joint report of two of the world's leading scientific organizations, the U.S. National Academy of Sciences and the Royal Society, of course, that's United Kingdom. And this was just a couple days ago, letters to the editor, and I'm just going to quote just a part of it. The facts are that climate disruption is known to be responsible for the superstorms, droughts, and wildfires that communities are experiencing today, and fossil fuel conglomerates are turning a deaf ear to societal problems caused by carbon pollution, and it just goes on and on and on. The point is that you see this over and over and over and over again, and if you take the time to really go in and start to investigate this, you go, wait a minute. This isn't quite as clear-cut as the media makes it out to be. So I thought that's the tack that we would take, and I want to get away from the media hysteria and everything else that goes along with this, and just look at some basic facts. In fact, I came across a very interesting piece of legislation. It's called the Oregon Petition Initiative. Are you familiar with that? That over 36,000 scientists have signed a petition to the U.S. government talking about global warming. And I'm not going to say exactly what the petition is. I'm going to wait and save that.
Okay.
Wait and save that. So I thought, why don't we start off this morning and look at two major definitions, global warming and climate change, because you see both words used interchangeably, synonymously. But are they the same?
Okay.
And the answer is yes and no. Yes and no.
Right.
Global warming, and some of this I want to look at because I want to get this exactly right. Global warming refers to a clear and continuing rise in the average temperature of the Earth's climate system. Okay, I can buy that.
Okay.
Okay. And by the way, these definitions are from Wikipedia.
Okay.
Climate change, a significant and lasting change in the statistical distribution of weather patterns over long periods of time, regardless of the cause. Fluctuations over periods shorter than a few decades, such as El Niño, do not represent climate change within this definition. Now, there's a major difference between those two definitions, but can they be used synonymously with each other? And I think to a large degree,
they are.
The answer is yes, from the perspective of that if global warming is really taking place, and we'll get to that in just a minute, if that is taking place, can that impact climate change or affect it? And the answer is yes. So from that perspective, can those terms be used synonymously? Yes. But are they different? Yes, they are. And I think during our discussion, I want to use global warming as an umbrella for the complete discussion, because most of the time when you see articles written on this, when you see the media hype on this, it'll be global warming, global warming, global warming.
Which means the continuing rise of the average temperature of the Earth's climate system.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay. Or in other words, I think from a more simplistic viewpoint would be the average temperature or the rise of the temperature of the Earth.
Yeah. Now, I have also heard and read that even though those who are concerned about global warming are backing away from the term global warming,
right,
and going to climate change, because the cycle says, yeah, you'll go through a warm period, then you go through a cooling period.
Well, there's another reason for that. If you think back a couple of years ago, remember when the news media announced that they had found emails from the global warming community that really they had jimmied the information, and a lot of the information was not correct, that they were slanting it towards their perspective? Remember that? There was a little firestorm over that. So all of a sudden, global warming was dropped, and then a more friendly terminology was used. Climate change.
Okay.
See, so I think, yeah, it's a combination of both. That climate change is kind of a more friendly approach towards global warming. It's not as, it doesn't rub you quite as much as global warming does. You know, well, I can hook into climate change, yeah, and particularly with all the cold they've had back in the east, you know, the past 3 or 4 months, you know, see, I told you so, it's a climate change. You know, it's interesting, whether we have droughts, whether we have heat, and of course then you have the all the freezing temperatures and the record snow levels back in the east, well, that's the cause of, or that's the result from climate change, global warming. And I think the people in the East right now have a hard time hooking that one up. So.
Okay. So okay, well, I don't want to get too political here, but it appears that the argument is changing from global warming to climate change, because that's more universal in their argument.
I think from my perspective also, it's also a friendlier approach to it.
Right.
But it's really, when you read the literature, it's basically global warming, global warming, global warming. So when you say both terms, I think we can put them in the same camp, although they are really different.
Okay.
They are different, yeah. So in talking about this, Perry, I wanted to start out this morning and start off first with the biblical perspective.
Good.
Okay.
Good place to start.
Yep, and the question is, who owns this world and is responsible for wise stewardship? And I think
God owns it, and we're supposed to be good stewards of it.
Boy, you've got that right. And you know, it starts right off Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens, the earth. I mean, it's obvious. Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. So, it's in reality everything that we see, the universe, the earth, it's God's, but we have no right to exploit it. And I think that's very clear in Scripture. But here's something that's also interesting, Perry. In Genesis 1:28 says, God directed Adam and Eve to be fruitful, and I'm quoting, fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. And I'm going to come back to that word in just a minute. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and every living thing that moves on the earth. And then, of course, Genesis 2:15 then goes on to say, then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. So as a result, we have a direct responsibility from God to care for what we have been entrusted with, even though this universe and this earth have been cursed by sin and are doing what?
Decaying.
Decaying, coming apart. That's exactly right. So things, even if you go back thousands and thousands of years, things are not getting better. You know, second law of thermodynamics, everything is running down. So we have been entrusted, according to Genesis, by God to, and the word that I want to come back to is subdue the earth, and in Hebrew that word is translated into use it for your benefit, is almost an exact Hebrew translation on that word. But I think within that definition, Perry, there is still a major concept of using it wisely, using what God has entrusted to it, even though it is running downhill. So I just wanted to start off with that and talk about that we do have responsibility according to Genesis, the first chapter of Genesis. Now, let's continue on and talk about 6 primary claims about global warming. And what I want to do is just go through, and we might have to continue this on the 24th.
All right, let me take a good break here. This is a good place to take a break, and we'll come back. We'll deal with the 6 primary claims about global warming. I think it's very important that you get what he just said about the biblical perspective of it. We are living in a cursed world that is slowly declining. We are to subdue it. We are to be good managers and stewards of it. Have we exploited it? Can we correct some of those things?
Right.
You know, what's the difference between conservation and environmentalism? That might be another argument.
Ooh, there's another good one.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll take a quick break and we'll come back. All right, we're back, and we're talking a new series. We won't get through it today. It's going to take a couple of times. Global warming versus climate change.
Right.
John Mittendorf's home phone number and cell number is
541.
No. We're just trying to get a
handle on it.
A handle on this discussion is huge, and I have to tell you, there's a couple of issues out there that are hot buttons. This is one of them. Environmentalism versus conservation is another. Same-sex marriage is one, abortion is one. Yeah. And it's amazing how we quickly camp out on one side, which may be okay, but do we really know what we're defending?
Right.
Or are we just in a popular camp?
Do you know the facts?
Do you know the facts?
Right.
And this is our attempt here today, is to give you some good background on global warming, climate change from a biblical perspective. All right, now.
And by the way, Perry, we'll be back on the 24th with this and finish this up. But at that time, then I'll have all the notes completed, and we'll make the notes available that has all this information, links they can go to and check it out.
You'll be able to get them at the website or come by here and get them.
Exactly.
All right, 6 primary claims about global warming.
Okay, first of all, global warming is really taking place, is what they're saying. Is that true or false?
Okay. My limited knowledge.
It's 50-50. It's either yes or no.
Well, I'm going to say in my limited knowledge, the answer is yes.
You're exactly right. Global warming is taking place. And,
Right.
From a scientific perspective, the National Climatic Data Center, how's that for a list of words?
Shows the Earth temperature going up.
Shows the Earth temperature since 1880 has gone up 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
So it is taking place.
Right. Since
However,
1880.
Since 1880.
So it's 130, 40 years.
Yeah. But I want you to keep that in mind, because when we come back the 24th and talk about this, that 1.2 degrees Fahrenheit is going to become very, very important. Okay? Second question. Greenhouse gases are responsible for life on this earth.
Not
True or
true.
false?
Not true.
How would you answer that then?
What do you mean?
Well, greenhouse gases are responsible for life on this earth, and that's basically what the environmentalists are saying. Is that true or false?
I'm sorry, I misread that. I think you're saying greenhouse gases are responsible for the temperature rise.
Let me put it this way. Greenhouse gases are responsible for maintaining life on this earth.
Well, I can't answer that because I don't know the true definition of greenhouse gases.
Good, because I'm going to give it to you.
Okay. I can't answer that one.
Yeah, the answer to that question, Perry, is basically yes. I mean, there's a lot of factors for life on this earth. Yeah.
CO2, oxygen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, when you look at the Earth's environment, you have at the upper troposphere, you have four major gases. You have water vapor, you have carbon dioxide, you have methane, and you have ozone.
Okay.
What's interesting is, and this is what's not talked about in the media, is that water vapor provides the majority of the greenhouse gases, probably 95%. Carbon dioxide, the gas that's most debated, and you've heard that term over and over and over, CO2. Burning of fossil fuels are putting more CO2 in the atmosphere. It's going up, and it's blocking the greenhouse, it's blocking the rays, and it just goes on and on and on and on. Carbon dioxide really provides a very, very small percentage of the greenhouse gas, only about 5% or a little less than 5%. And of course, methane and ozone is a very, very small percentage. It's water vapor that does the most of it. And the way that it works, Perry, is if the greenhouse gases are in balance the way they're supposed to be, you have the ultraviolet rays from the sun, comes from the sun, comes through our atmosphere and hits the earth. And then, of course, in a lot of cases, they can be redirected back outside the earth and then back towards the sun. As the greenhouse gases change, they can either let less ultraviolet rays through to the earth, or they can let more heat from the earth back into space. So you can see that if the greenhouse gases are not in balance, if the greenhouse gases don't let enough rays from the sun come through, the earth is going to be cooler. And then, of course, if the greenhouse gases are still not in the right percentage and they let too much of the heat go back out, it can be the opposite, so to speak. So, depending on the greenhouse gases, you get too much. Wait, let me back up a second. You have too much rays from the sun coming through, the earth is going to be too warm. And if the rays are then directed back out into space, then the earth is going to be too cool. And that's just a quick overview of how that works. So, if the greenhouse gases are not in balance, can it change the temperature of the earth? And the answer is yes, it can.
Yes, it can.
Can that affect life on this earth? Yes, it can, in a very big way. However, what's not really being printed or published or talked about is the fact that carbon dioxide is really a very, very small part of that. It's water vapor that does the majority of it.
And there's a reason we have large oceans.
Yeah, 75 two-thirds of the earth, close to 70%, is water. Which, by the way, Perry, is the major receptacle for carbon dioxide. As the sun's rays come through the greenhouse effect through our atmosphere and hits the ocean, the warmer the rays are, the warmer the water is going to be, more evaporation is going to happen. More evaporation, more CO2 is going to go into the atmosphere. The cooler it is, the less evaporation, the less CO2 you're going to have.
Okay. Fascinating.
Okay.
Interesting.
Pretty simple, right?
Yeah. Well,
and it is pretty simple.
Yeah.
It is pretty simple. Global warming will drive many plants and animals to extinction. And I know you've heard all of these over and over and over. True or false?
No.
And that is false. It's a fact that changing conditions such as volcanoes, wildfires, melting ice caps, and receding glaciers are capable of, affecting a diversity of people and plants. But you know what's interesting is that we have a governmental endangered list in place today for animals that are being endangered. not because of global warming, but primarily because of poaching, deforestation, and a host of other reasons. It really has nothing to do with, that portion has nothing to do with global warming. And so currently there is a lack of evidence to support extinctions, I knew I could get that right, resulting from global warming. It's all part of the hyperbole. All I have to do is just write an article and say, mankind is headed for death due to a changing earth. Plants and animals are going to extinction. The world is getting warmer. The glaciers are receding. The polar bears are sliding off the ice caps, and the polar ice caps are receding, and which, by the way, they are. And by the way, they are. But if you go back to after the Ice Age, there was a lot of glaciers. So as Leon said, it's cyclical to a large degree. And we're going to get into that a little bit more the 24th when we come back and talk about this.
And I might add that from a political standpoint, by moving off of global warming to climate change, if the Earth does cool, they're still within their argument.
Yes.
And so therefore they can capitalize off of it.
Yes, yes, yeah.
All right.
Next one. The oceans will dramatically rise during the next century. Where have you heard that one?
All over the, well, Big Al.
Big Al.
Big Al says that.
Yeah, an inconvenient truth. He implied the oceans will rise 20 feet and submerge much of the Earth's coastlines in the next 50 years. And of course, that is his opinion. And he's not a scientist. And so in doing some checking, I came across a current climate model from the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they estimate, and by the way, they're not too bad, they estimate that ocean levels may rise approximately 16 inches in this century. May. Which is a far cry from the Armageddon that the other side is talking about. Far cry. So, can the ocean levels rise? Yeah, they can rise a little bit. So it's not that big a deal. 50 feet, you know, that's something else. By the way, did you know that after the flood, that the ocean, they figured the ocean levels rose somewhere between 200 to 300 feet.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's because of...
Permanently?
Yes, because there used to be a landmass between Alaska and basically Siberia, which is now covered up with water.
Okay.
See? So, and that's, I think that's scientifically acceptable.
Okay.
All righty?
Even though they don't believe in the flood.
Even though they don't believe in the flood, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Next, weather catastrophes will increase due to global warming. Have you heard that one before?
Oh, well, that's the whole reason of what's happening in the East Coast.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's interesting that weather patterns were relatively stable prior to Noah's global flood, but have significantly fluctuated since the flood. And so basically, when God created this earth, everything was perfect and everything was stable. And then, of course, Adam and Eve sinned. And what I'm talking about now, science rejects. Science rejects. But when Adam and Eve sinned, the universe and the earth was cursed. And since then, second law of thermodynamics, everything is running down. And so since then, since the flood particularly, you have had changing climate conditions that were not there prior to the flood. So, do we see major changes and swings and cyclic proportions in weather changes today?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Okay. And that's since the flood. It's also interesting that since the advent of satellites and other advanced equipments, weather events have been able to be recorded in accurate detail, and that's since about 1978. They've been keeping a pretty good track on that. And basically what that means is that since 1978, they have been keeping a closer track on weather patterns, but prior to 1978, they really weren't. So what that means is that there has not been a justification in being able to validate an increase in weather catastrophes over a long period of time. So in other words, they've just been tracking it, I would say, from a very specific viewpoint more recently than over a long, long period of time. So although we do know that there was an ice age, a little ice age, there was the warm period, roughly what they call the warm period, which is AD 900 to 1300. We know that. I'll get to that a little bit later.
All right, we probably won't get to the last couple, but we'll deal with it next week. Let me ask you this. How do you explain the increase in, say, hurricanes, volcano reactions or eruptions, or typhoons and tsunamis and stuff like that?
Well, interesting question, Perry, because even though the number of hurricanes has increased in recent years, and I found this in the Journal of Nature Geoscience, they've concluded that global warming is not the cause for increased hurricanes, and they will likely decrease by the end of this century. So again, it's cyclic. We've had an increase in hurricanes, correct? But Nature Geoscience Journal says that by the end of this century, they feel that it's going to cycle back to less hurricanes.
Interesting. All right, we're out of time, but we're going to continue with this, the difference between global warming and climate change, the differences and the similarities.
On the 24th, we're going to cover, are humans causing global warming?
Are humans?
That's the big question.
Okay, because I've often wondered why those who propagate this aren't going after third world countries that are clearly violating. We're doing pretty well here in the country
compared to China and some other countries.
Beijing and
Russia.
Others,
yeah, exactly.
All right, thanks, John. All right, stick around, and when we're all done in a week or so, we'll make these notes available to you. Thanks, John.
You bet.
We'll see you next time on Focus Today.